Now that you know about Ketu in the Rasis and Rahu in the Rasis, you pretty much know most of what you need to know about Ketu or Rahu conjunct the Bhava Cusps. Because the issues that are brought out by Ketu and Rahu in the Rasis are the very same when they conjunct different Bhava Cusps, with Aries being equal to the first Bhava Cusp. So if somebody's got Rahu in the first Bhava, it's going to give a similar effect as Rahu in Aries. So even if that first Bhava, say, falls in Gemini, and Rahu's in Gemini, they're going to have a Rahu and Aries quality to them. So on the handout I sent you on Rahu in the Rasis, for every position of Rahu in a Rashi, I give an attitude, a complex, a compensation, and a breakdown. Well, that's going to be exactly the same process that happens to the house position. So Rahu conjunct the first house cusp, just like Rahu and Aries will get an attitude complex of being insecure in their activities and insecure in their own personal ability to make success. They'll compensate for that by being very dutiful and trying to prove that they are capable. And they'll break down by becoming critical and intolerant of other people's weaknesses. Okay? Just as if Rahu was in Aries. So the whole psychological process that happens when Rahu conjuncts a particular sign is the same as when Rahu conjuncts a particular Bhava Cusp. Okay? So you already know a lot about Rahu and Ketu. There's a couple small differences though. And that is, we're just going to use Aries as a hypothetical logna here. So we have the first Bhava Cusp falling in Aries. And then we may have the second and third Bhava Cusp fall in Taurus, the fourth fall in Cancer, the fifth fall in Leo, and so on. So the Bhava Cusps, sometimes you'll find two cusps falling in one particular Rashi. Then if we stick Rahu in there, or Ketu in there, then we're going to have Rahu actually strongly influencing two Bhavas, the second and third Bhavas. So they'll have two areas on where Rahu is really pushing them. Okay? So keep that in mind. Rahu can be conjunct and Ketu can be conjunct more than one Bhava Cusp. And of course, if Ketu was here in Scorpio, it would be conjuncting the 8th and 9th Bhava Cusp. So the person would be coming from an 8th, 9th Bhava point of view, which is 8th Bhava emotionally secure, 9th Bhava focused in their lives with a sense of meaning and purpose. And they would be learning for material security, 2nd Bhava, and putting their will and energy into succeeding in their goals, which is 3rd Bhava. So developing the will and skills required to succeed in Ketu's goals. So then we would have, just more Rahu Ketu stuff going on. And yeah, that would make for a little bit more of a stressful life, because any Bhava Cusps that Rahu and Ketu are conjunct, those Bhava Cusps are going to be the very specific areas that they're evolving in, which means those are going to be difficult areas. And they may be very rewarding. This person, depending where Venus is, the Lord of the 2nd and 3rd Bhava, Rahu may make them wealthy, whatever. So they may be successful, they may not be. That depends on really judging Rahu and Ketu, which we'll get to soon. But it's going to be stressful and difficult because Rahu and Ketu are malefic. And so the more cusps that Rahu and Ketu conjunct, the more stress you're going to have in your life. Okay? So, Rahu and Ketu can be conjunct more cusps. And the psychological process, which is a lot of what you're going to talk to your clients about, is going to mirror the equivalent Rashi. Aries 1st house, Taurus 2nd house, Gemini 3rd house, and so on. Okay? So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing is, the Bhava represents the specific area of life, the specific concrete thing that they're going to have their hands on. So, let's say we've got a person who's got their Lagna in Libra, okay, and Rahu in Aries and Ketu in Libra. So this is sort of an opposite of the natural thing, right? Because now the 1st house relates to Libra, the 7th sign, and the 1st sign, Aries, relates to the 7th Bhava. Okay? Now here, the person comes into life with Libra qualities. They're good tradesmen. They know how to decide if something's worthwhile and valuable enough to earn and buy or work for from other people. They'll apply themselves to getting what they need from other people and other sources. Other sources are, of course, always created by other people. And pay what it's worth for them to get those things. Okay? And they'll do that specifically for first house reasons. To develop as a person, to feel secure as a person. So a person with Ketu and Libra in the first house is going to be a person who is good at wheeling and dealing, good at buying things that are important to him, that validate them and make them a strong person, a capable person, Ketu in the first house. But everything that makes him capable and strong will have been things that, you know, they somehow got from other people. Whether they bought it, whether they traded it, whether they got the ideas from somebody and then ran with those ideas, or whether they, like I used the example of Ketu and Libra before, studied a lot and put in the time to learn the works of other people, and then became very authoritative in that knowledge, whatever. So, but everything they've done with Ketu and Libra in the first house, everything that's them, they've sourced from sources outside themselves. They've traded for those things. So this is a personality that's developed into a strong individual personality as a result of everything it's managed to trade, borrow, get, or use from other people, okay, or other sources. It's not things that they've necessarily created independently, because that's the Aries quality, okay? Then, with Rahu in the 7th house, what they're evolving towards, what they're working towards, is Aries, 7th house, so developing Aries. So this, first of all, means doing things as independently, doing things without worrying about the repercussions upon other people, coming up with completely original ideas that are not the result of what other people they've learned from other people or gotten from other people, developing complete and unique products, if they're into an inventor or businessman or whatever, but doing things in a completely new and different way, taking completely new actions, a new step in a completely new direction, without any thought about the repercussions those directions may have on other people. That's what Rahu in Aries is gearing up for. And they're going to do that specifically in the 7th house, in the areas of relationships, partnerships, okay? You know, so that's the specific area that will happen in. Also, the 7th house, of course, is the house of business. So they may do that in the realm of business. So this is whenever you see the sign, Rahu and Ketu in signs that are opposite their houses, you get this sort of interesting dynamic where they're coming from is similar to where they're going, but flipped. Okay? And these sometimes are the most interesting charts, actually. So, and the Rahu and Aries person is coming from this individual background of developing as a self, but developing as a self through what other people have done, which is Libra, through benefiting and trading and sharing with other people, developing a self. 2, being unique and different, completely new, taking new actions, which is Aries, and through that, finding partnerships that are more in sync with their Aries nature. Okay, because they're going to develop partnerships at the same time. So as this person, Rahu in Aries, becomes the stronger individual and comes up with his complete, unique, original ideas, his relationships, because Rahu's in the 7th house, are going to shift and change in accordance with that. And his business partners and his business and any 7th house matters he does. Okay, so the house area is a specific area that gets affected. But sort of the undercurrent of what's really happening is the sign. So what's really happening is the sign, Libra. A person who is adept at trading to get what they need. What they get in trade develops a self. That develops a concrete self. Then what Rahu's teaching them to act completely independently. which is Aries. And in acting completely independently, they're going to develop their relationships, their partnerships, and businesses, okay, through a complete independent action, okay? So it'll be like that anywhere. Let's move over a hair, and let's put a Ketu in the first house in Scorpio and Rahu in the 7th there. So here's a person who has been working on Ketu in Scorpio. Complete emotional security, strong introversion, but basically focusing on emotional security as the key means of security. And that emotional security is the very foundation of their security as an individual. So this is a very emotionally, emotionally defined person, but who's emotionally very controlled and emotionally very secure. And the whole individuality becomes this completely secure emotional package. Okay? Rahu in Libra is teaching them the worth of material security. And as they develop material security, they'll develop important partnerships and relationships. Okay? Or we can say their material security will develop in the realm of partnerships and relationships. Okay? So there's always the concrete area that's getting affected is the sign. So if somebody says, I'm having relationship issues, and say their Rahu's maturing, they're 42, and they're saying, I'm having relationship issues, if you were going to guess between Rahu being in Libra, or, say, Rahu being in the 7th house, what's it going to be? It's going to be Rahu in the 7th house, right? Because the concrete things that are getting affected are the house. Okay, so Rahu in Libra is not going to specifically give relationship issues. Okay? Rahu in the 7th will specifically give relationship issues. Okay? So the specific things they're working on is that. But the undercurrent of why they're working on that, why those issues are even there, are going to be based on the sign. So the Rahu and Taurus person having relationship issues because Rahu's in the 7th is having those relationship issues because of Taurus. Because they're not materially secure, because they feel guilty and unworthy. Okay? Now, a person who has Rahu in Libra is going to have 12th house issues. Okay? Which is relaxation, get away from trouble and stress, escaping the hardships and troubles of the world. Rahu will make that really difficult for them to do. Why does it become difficult? Because of Libra. Okay, so the area that's affected is their vacations, their liberation, their freedom to get away from stress and pain. Why? Because of Libra. Because they're not very skilled in making good deals, deciding the value of something before they buy it. And so they will be short on 12th house means. Rahu in the 12th is going to give extra expenses, wasted expenses. Why? Well, in this case, because of simply bad business decisions or bad ideas for paying more for something than it's worth. Okay? So the sign is always going to show the reason, the behavior that brings about the trouble in the specific area indicated by the Bhava. Okay, so keep that very important difference between the Bhavas and the signs different. Okay? Now, when it comes to the psychological thing, though, Rahu and Taurus is going to have the very same psychological outlook as Rahu in the Sagittarius, the 2nd house. Meaning for Scorpio Lagna, Rahu in the 2nd, or conjunct the 2nd Bhava. Okay? So you can read, and you want to read, the psychological effects, the attitude, complex, and breakdown of the sign relevant to the complementary house. Okay? Then, you also have a huge handout with many, many pages about Rahu and Ketu in the sign, or conjunct the Bhava Cusps themselves, where I give interpretations for Rahu and Ketu conjunct each Bhava Cusp. Read that and put that to good use as well in the context of the Bhavas. That'll give you a lot of insights about a lot of the different behaviors that people have because of those. Like, for instance, Rahu in 7th, and Ketu in 1st. Anyone who has Ketu in 1st tends to feel naked around other people. They feel totally secure when it's just them. But the minute other people get involved, They feel very naked, very vulnerable. And I actually even tell these people, you actually literally feel naked around other people. And they're like, yeah, I just totally feel completely naked around other people. One of the things Ketu in the first house does to try to avoid that feeling is they'll use Rahu to tune into other people's needs and desires and mutate themselves in accordance with that. So they lose this personality and blend into the other person's personality and tend to get along with, have the capacity to get along with lots of different types of people because of that. But they're never getting along with those people as themselves. They're getting along with those people as what those other people want from them. So they literally blend into those other people's nature. So they turn into the other. And that over time doesn't work because if they're not really being who they are, which is Ketu in the first house, eventually a person will get drained and exhausted. And then that relationship that they're shifting to fit into will eventually have to come to an end. So there's all these sort of subtle things that happen when we get Ketu and Rahu conjunct Bhava Cusp. And I have all those written down pretty extensively, so you want to really read those and use those when you're looking at charts. And we'll also tackle a lot of that when we start looking at some example charts. But that's one of the other important, so there's lots of little bits of important tidbit information in those write-ups on that other handout of Rahu and Ketu in conjunct the Bhava Cusp. Okay, so study that. I'm not going to go through all that in video again. I had it written down and I figured it's a lot easier for you to have it on paper to read it when you need it than for me to say it and for you to have to look it up on a video every time. Okay? So, otherwise you know everything already about Rahu and Ketu conjunct the Bhava Cusp because you studied Rahu and Ketu in the Rasis already, which is most of it. Now sometimes you're going to get a chart where, let's say this is the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. This will be the 8th, this will be the 1st, of course, this will be the 10th, this will be the 11th and 12th, and this will be the 9th. So you might get a person who doesn't have any Bhava Cusp falling in a particular sign. Just like you can get Rahu and Pisces in this chart and Ketu and Virgo conjuncting 2 Bhava Cusp. Sometimes you get a chart where Rahu and Ketu don't conjunct any Bhava Cusp. Okay? In that case, Rahu and Ketu become a little trickier to judge because what happens is they have the sign issue. It's still apparent. It's still there. The Ketu and Libra, the Rahu and Aries thing is still going to be there. But there's no outlet for that in a real concrete area. So the question is, where is that area going to impact in their life? What areas is that going to impact? Okay? First of all, it's not going to impact areas as significantly as if there was a cusp joining it. Okay? It'll only impact concrete things, unless it's conjunct a planet, of course. But it's really only going to conjunct or impact concrete things to a secondary degree. Okay? Which simply means that Rahu and Ketu will not, disturb things in their lives to as great a degree as when they conjunct a Bhava Cusp. Okay? So what secondary things are they going to impact? Okay? Or what things are they going to impact secondarily? Well, they're going to secondarily impact things that they Rashi aspect. Okay? So Ketu in Libra is going to Rashi aspect the 10th in Leo, the 7th in Taurus, and the 4th in Aquarius. So I'm just going to write Ketu here so you can see Ketu aspects 10th, 7th, and 4th. So 10th, 7th, and 4th are all going to be areas that are going to have a secondary impact. So if you want to talk about things that Ketu might, be finding security in, like career, home and happiness, and relationships, okay? And then things that Rahu's impacting will be based on what it aspects. Rahu aspects Aquarius, the 10th, Leo, the 10th, so Aquarius, the 4th, Leo, the 10th, and the 1st here, okay? Now, both of them are aspecting the 4th and 10th, okay? But both of them are not aspecting the 1st and 7th. Okay? Only Rahu aspects the 1st, only Ketu aspects the 7th in this. So the place to start with this person is to start with, alright, Ketu is going to have a 7th house influence. There's an element of social development that's been strong, Ketu influencing 7th, and partnership development that's been strong. Rahu in Aries aspecting the 1st shows that they will be developing more as an individual this time, Rahu 1st, influencing the 1st. But they'll be doing it through an Aries nature, which means, independent action that develops into a stronger individuality. Okay? It's not going to happen because of the Scorpio reason, it's going to happen because of the Aries reason. So as they develop Aries, it'll impact their 1st house. As they perfect Libra through Ketu and Libra, it'll impact their 7th house. That'll be the area of that perfection. Okay? Now, with respect to the signs that are aspected by both Ketu and Rahu, which one is going to be more important? Okay, well, move them towards each other and see which one they touch first. Ketu and Rahu always go backwards, right? So Ketu moving backwards is going to hit Leo before Rahu does, and Rahu is going to hit Aquarius first. So, you want to emphasize Ketu's influence to Leo more and Rahu's influence to Aquarius more. Okay? Just simply speaking. So, we have Ketu influencing 10th Bhava Cusp. Okay, I'll write it down here. We kind of lost it in the mess. We have Ketu influencing 10th Bhava Cusp. So, as they, perfect their abilities to trade and share in an equal win-win way, that's based on knowing what something really takes, what something's really worth, that will help perfect their karmas, their actions, and make a greater career success, make them capable of doing greater deeds, which is 10th Bhava. Okay? And Rahu moving to the 4th, as they develop more as an individual, and have the courage and confidence to take the actions, all by themselves through their own ideas and merits towards success, that'll help root them in 4th house happiness and give them more emotional strength. Okay? So that will be the way to see which house to emphasize. But the house I usually emphasize, that I focus on, is the house that only one of them aspects. That's really the most important one. In this case, Ketu 7th, Rahu 1st. Now, if they're in dual signs, then they're all going to aspect all the houses equally. Okay? In that case, Ketu, the house it's moving towards, is its focus house, and the house that Rahu moves towards is its focus house. Okay? Now, but those are going to be of secondary importance. They're not going to be nearly as serious as when Ketu and Rahu actually conjunct a Bhava Cusp. That's really important. So lots of times if you see them where they're not conjunct any Bhava Cusp, you can just read the sign position and talk to the sign position about the person and not really worry that much about the house position. Okay, you can decide. But if you worry about the house position, that's the way you find the secondary house position. So you need to learn your Rashi aspects, which I haven't done videos on yet, but everyone here should have Graha Sutras, that textbook that I wrote, and Rashi aspects are detailed in Graha Sutras. So if you don't have that, grab a copy to learn Rashi aspects. Alright, so read that handout and then start looking at Rahu and Ketu and Bhavas, but always keep in mind the underlying reason for that development in that Bhava, which is the sign position that Rahu and Ketu are in.